he manages the data integration method group and has global responsibility for Nielsen data fusion methodologies. He launched also the Nielsen data fusion products in the US. Our second speaker will be Leslie Wood. Leslie is an innovator in advertising analytics with more than 25 years experience. She definitely doesn't look this. She is responsible for research and development at Nielsen Catalina Solutions, shaping the methodologies that keep the firm on the leading edge of marketing and advertising performance analytics. Leslie has been active in a project I was involved in with the ARF on identifying gaps in measuring advertising effectiveness, and she has been absolutely incredible in her insight about the field and the needs of the field to move forward. So we're absolutely delighted to have you with us, Leslie. Our last presenters will be Bob Bress and Claudio, and I don't know who's going to present or how you're going to share the two between the 15 minutes. Bob is Senior Director of Product Management and Analytics at Visible World. His expertise is primarily in analytics and the lead development of the next generation of advanced targeted advertising products and for television. So we're anxious to see about the next generation products. And Claudio is the EVP at Visible World. He heads up the company's industry-leading research, including innovative big data, 10+ billion records, research efforts, and heads up the Visible World's new initiatives involving the use of smart TV data to gain timely insights regarding TV program promotion effectiveness. What a group. So we're really looking forward to it. What the plan is, 15-minute presentation by each, hopefully leave time for discussion, question and answers, but also some discussion among the panelists. And with no further ado, Pete, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jerry. Good afternoon, everyone. So quite a long title, but hopefully quite a short presentation. Talking about credit card data and how we at Nielsen are working with credit card data to better understand and reach consumers. Just a brief overview, talk about the opportunity that exists in this space, then the challenges, particularly privacy and the methodologies we need to use. Then a very brief discussion about validity and a conclusion. So the online ad landscape. Online advertising is moving increasingly to programmatic buying, sometimes referred to as real-time buying. Well, I understand there's a subtle distinction between those two things. So Magna Global forecasting that US real-time buying to reach $10.5 billion by 2017, globally $33 billion. So it's a big deal. For us, Nielsen incorporating offline activity into this real-time buying system is really where we're aiming for. We are not getting involved in real-time buying itself and delivering advertising, but what we are trying to do is to enable insights about consumers, their media behavior and so on, to feed into those systems to make advertising better for advertisers and for consumers. Just as an example of this, you can probably tell I'm from Britain. I am also American as well, so I think I'm allowed in Philadelphia now, which is good news for me. So I was on the BBC News website, as I occasionally am, and I saw that I was served this ad. This genuinely happened to me. I was served this Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown As, CNN show. And it's actually really quite well-targeted advertising because I like Anthony Bourdain, and I'm in on Sundays at 9, and I actually watched the program. It was very good. Now, I haven't been paid by CNN to say that. They are a good client of us, but genuinely, it was a good piece of advertising. Whether it was real-time buying-enabled advertising and whether it used some of the insights that Nielsen has produced, I don't know. But anyway, good advertising in that case. So we're working with our TV viewing segments, getting those into online buying databases. We're also working with CPG segments through Nielsen Catalina. Leslie represents, and she may touch on that, I'm not sure. We also have segmentation, Prism, that we're putting into these online buying systems. But what I really want to focus on is credit card activity and the work we've been doing with that. So we have a relationship with an aggregator of credit card data. They have very detailed retailer-level purchase activity that covers actually about 80% of all credit card transactions in the US, plus a very large proportion of debit card transactions. So this gives a lot of insights into where consumers are spending money, and you can see all those different sort of categories that we can get into there. So that's great that we have this data, but for us to then enable these data to flow through into online ad serving capabilities, there's quite a lot of steps. And this is a very simplified chart that shows what we're doing. So we start with this credit card transaction data. We also have our Nielsen online panel that Nielsen recruits. These are homes and individuals who take part in measurement of online. And on that database, we have cookies that are downloaded on the panel members. And then DMPs, data management platforms, that may have 300 and 400 million cookies that enable linkage to those databases and then through into the advertisers. So a lot of processes going on, a lot of parties involved, and the challenges for Nielsen in particular, privacy and statistical. So, two processes to ensure privacy. First of all, a secure matching process. The credit card data is very sensitive data, and it needs to be privacy compliant. So we at Nielsen don't get to see any of that individual level data. Similarly, from our perspective, our online panelists and all our panelists are very sensitive information for us, and we want to preserve all our respondents' privacy as well. So linking those two together requires a third-party secure match. So those databases go into this third-party secure match. They're matched by names and addresses, and that gives us the first level of sort of privacy compliance. We end up with individuals with cookies and retailer activity from the credit card data. So that's the first level of integration. That isn't enough for our credit card partner. They don't want those data then subsequently to go out to another third party, a data management platform, where the cookies can be linked up and then related to the credit card activity, because that is not sufficient in terms of privacy compliance. So we go through one other step, which is a lookalike modeling process within a secure environment that the credit card company has set up. And at the end of that, we get individuals with cookies and then modeled retailer activity from credit card data rather than actual data. So a little bit more detail about that. We have the individuals, first of all, matched, so actual matched cookies with retailer data, and then we put it through a respondent-level data fusion. And we've got a lot of good common variables that we can use. Here we can match based on the demographics of our online panel, their online behavior, and we can match on retail purchases. So a very good and accurate and reliable data fusion comes out of that. And that ends up with a database which has individuals with cookies and then the modeled retailer activity. And that is sufficient to ensure the data privacy. So then how does that then get served up? And again, I was on the BBC News website and I got an ad for Lufthansa this time. And actually, I think that was just a redirect because I was researching flights to Frankfurt. So I don't think it has anything to do with real-time buying. I think that's just tracking me as I surf the net. But here we have that privacy-compliant database, the individuals with cookies and modeled retail activity. There's about 200,000 of those cookies being sent through to the data management platform, and they have about 300 million of those. And they then implement another lookalike modeling onto the cookies that then gets sent through to the ad networks and the publishers and gets put into the real-time buying systems and then competes in the real-time bidding for whether or not an ad will get served up. So how valid is this? Because that's the key thing as well. It's all very well saying we've done all this modeling and so on, and we've assured privacy, but unless you can demonstrate that you're actually doing something that delivers value, that's clearly better than just a random allocation of online ads, unless you can do that, then there's really no value in this. So we're in a position where we can do this validation. We start with really the end product of those matched cookies at the end, and then trace it all the way back into the secure analytics system and compare it with the real matched data before we do any lookalike modeling, so we sort of know the truth. and we can compare those two things. And we've done a lot of work looking into that. And the objective we were given as a commercial objective was to demonstrate that this whole process, all the way through these steps, would deliver an improvement on random targeting that would be better than 25%, essentially. And what we've got here in this table is an analysis that demonstrates that we succeeded in that. We've split the overall targets that we looked at, and there were probably about, I think, 800 targets we were looking at here. Split them by penetration levels as well, and also by total spend and heavy spend. So something in group 1 may be, for example, spending at a big box retailer, Home Depot or something like that, and then in group 6, a small sort of local restaurant, for example. In all cases, we've exceeded that 125 index. What this means is that if you're using this to do real-time buying, you can with confidence bid 25% higher than you would have, and you know you're still getting better value for money because of these indexes. So that's really the value of this. So in conclusion, obviously, as I said at the outset, making ads relevant is good for the advertising industry. Being more efficient is also good for consumers. Nobody really wants to see ads that have no relevance to them. This helps at both ends. Integrating the data sources from offline then gives you more relevant online advertising. There's so much information you get from online activity, of course, but there's also a lot of things that people are not doing online, and understanding their TV behavior and other behavior, like the retail information from credit cards, is really clearly of value. But if you're going to do this right, you need the good data. We have very good data from the credit card data. We have very good data from our online panels. Putting those together in a privacy-compliant way is clearly essential. But then you also need to demonstrate statistical validity. And it's clear that there's a huge opportunity in this real-time buying space. But I also think a lot of people are flying a little bit blind, and we're trying to make this a very transparent process and demonstrate the value of what we're doing. So with that, I'll say thank you and hand over to Leslie.
Leslie?
Thank you. So we're going to talk today. So Pete and I work both for a Nielsen kind of company. We're connected somewhat, and the kind of data we use is differently, but I've taken a completely different tack at what I'm going to talk about. So we're talking about using single source to drive precise, profitable marketing. So what I'm going to cover is why we consider this, this is truly customer-centric. You talk about customer analytics, where we are looking at this household by household, which is what single source data is. So I'm a huge proponent of single source data. I'm going to talk about what we use our data to do, which is targeting as well as ROI, and show you some case studies. So Nielsen Catalina is a combined strength of two partners. It's a joint venture between Nielsen and Catalina, and we get all of the assets from both parents. We then feed back half the revenue to each of the parents. But we do have access to all of the data from both parents, and they're both extremely strong members of the community. So Nielsen has huge strength with media data and buy data, lots of purchasing data, and Catalina balances that out with big shopper data, frequent shopper data. Catalina actually has a server in every store, so we get the data within the day. Good. So what do we do? We put together watch data and buy data, and those are Nielsen terms. Nielsen likes watch. In fact, it's not just watch. Some of it is. There's TV data. But we also have radio, which is more like listen, and online, which is view, and mobile, radio, and magazines. So there's we collect this information across all different kinds of media. My goal is to have every media source included in the data. To that, we match buy data. So we have Catalina, which is very, very big data, as well as HomeScan, which is a currency quality panel. We often bring in client proprietary data, and roughly that's about 70 million households. We put those together by actually, Pete was talking about third-party blind matches. These are all put together with a third-party blind match. They're either cookie matched, or if it's in a digital world, we have about 20 partners where if it's registered data, we actually do name and address matching. If it's non-registered data, we match with cookies. But we connect these data sets. So we have one household. We have our backbone is to have an ID for every household in the United States. And then we bring data in and we connect it to that backbone. And every time we come in with an analysis, we choose which set of households we're going to use. So we don't have data for every household, but we have sets and we put them together. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Tom. I don't know if he's here, but he was talking, Davenport was earlier talking about big data versus small. Total proponent of small data. We love small data, but we love a specific kind of small data. It's currency quality, representative quality data, critical to make big data valuable. So truly believe that if you have our model for every data set, we want to have a currency quality data with big data. We believe that by putting them together, you understand the biases in your big data. Big data is not, we have one census level data set. Those are subscribers to magazines. We have every subscriber. But almost all, this is available data. It isn't a census, so you don't know what your biases are. You don't know what you have versus what you don't have unless you have something that's representative. So putting big and small together, small like really smart representative, creates a much smarter data set. And we do this for every kind of data set we use. For Catalina, we have 70 million frequent shopper cards. Mostly that's supermarkets. We do also have Rite Aid. So we have 12 of the top 14 supermarkets in the country. HomeScan, on the other hand, has 100,000 households, and those households scan everything that comes into the household. So you put those together, and you can understand what people are buying outside of our retailers, as well as understand what holes are we missing, what parts of different kinds, which sets of UPCs do we have good data for, where do we have not good data, how does it go together? To that, we add, in the case of TV, set-top box, and people meter. So we have Nielsen's currency quality people meter data, roughly 50,000 households. To that, we add 4.3 million set-top boxes. So we have currency quality, we know what a rating is, and we have set-top box. We also, in both cases, use the overlap panels. So HomeScan and Catalina, we have 51,000 households where we have both sets of information. So we can look at actual households. What are we capturing with one data set that we're not capturing with the other? For our set-top box and our people meter, we have a large number of households where we have both the people meter data and the set-top box. We've learned how to edit the set-top box data, and we have to change our edits all the time because they change the set-top boxes. They change the rules on how they're editing and what they're doing with set-top boxes, and we're constantly having to maintain and keep that up. So that's TV, but we also, I thought I'd share for digital. For digital, we have about 100 million households where we have online portals and publishers, as well as Nielsen Online, which is about 100,000 households. Same idea. One, we know every single ad that's placed. The other we know through particular our 20-something partners and what ads are served there. But beyond this, so in print we have subscribers, and we also have what people buy, what magazines they buy in the store. For radio, we have Nielsen Audio that used to be called Arbitron. And so we have, that's just currency. We have a mobile, Nielsen has a mobile panel, and then we have 4 or 5 partners that actually serve mobile ads. And we're working on newspapers with Scarborough. So our goal is to have that complete look at every touch point that you get from media and what happens when you buy. How does that change your offline, in the store buying behavior? The idea is you can start anywhere on this circle, but it's a continuous optimization process. So you start with measuring what a sales effect, what kind of sales are we getting from our current plan. That helps us define who we should be delivering advertising to. We then go and find the right media to buy. We optimize the plan. All the data gets passed through. One of the big things we've done is to make all this data pass through the agencies and the buying systems and the tracking systems and really be on the desktops of the people who are doing the work. And then measure it again. Did we improve? How much did we improve? And it's an OODA loop that goes around and around. So I'm going to take you through some case studies. Didn't want to take too much time, but this sort of gives you a flavor of what we do. Not a whole lot of really technical, what are we doing, how are we doing the modeling. Happy to talk about that. We have a toolbox for approach, so we have many tools that were built. We've currently got 4, with a 5th coming online later in the year. So we believe that buyer graphics are really way more important than demographics. So buyer graphics, think demos define demographics, buyers define buyer graphics. So it's what do people buy? This example, there was 10 brands that were looked at, but you can imagine beer isn't really defined by men 18 to 34. Any brand isn't necessarily defined by women 25 to 54. You miss who the buyer is and who isn't. So we allow our customers to go in and actually build what kind of target they want. They can build that target from a loyal, a heavy, a light, any kind of definition they want to come up with. And then they can deliver that across all the rest of the media. So it's define once and activate everywhere. So we have, our data's been in DMPs DMPs have only been around for a while, but our data's been used to target digital for, I think we're on 7 years. So we have many studies where we've gone around this circle, and I'll be showing some normative data across our 2,000 studies we've done. So you can see all the mobile, the radio, gaming, etc. There's all kinds of media. So here's an example of looking at various metrics. So the 2 on the left are households and exposures. Those tend to be constant because that's how we define them. The top third is the heavy category, middle third, medium category, light category. But let's look at what kind of dollar sales. We have lots of dollar sales against heavy, of course, and light against light. But what kind of sales lift did you get when you delivered advertising to the 2 groups? And we see that you get 3 times as much sales lift when you advertise to the heavy category buyers. So let's say you've defined these heavy category buyers, then you need to know where to go find them. So we can look at all television ratings and look at cable networks and everywhere and say, okay, if you defined it on women 18 to 49, what would it be? E comes up as number 11. We now define it on a buyer graphic, and it's 2. So you can see where should I put my media to actually deliver these. So for mass media like TV, it looks like this. For digital and targeted addressable media, we have addressable TV with some of our clients. You actually can define which household you'd like to deliver the message to. And what kind of outcome does that produce? So versus the original plan, you've gone around the circle. We see about in this particular case, a 20%. The next slide sort of takes you through all 3 steps: define, buy, measure, and on average, we see about a 10% increase in what can be measured. So this is more normative, what the average behavior is. If we look at what kind of sales lift you can have, TV versus digital, they actually turn out to be fairly similar when you're using non-targeted, just demographically targeted campaigns. When you use targeted for buyers, both of them increase about 30%. So you go from 17 to 22 or 18 to 24. Those are like a one-third increase. This is based on roughly 1,000 studies. We're now, it's probably a year and a half old, we're now well over 2,000 studies we've been doing, and we use that toolbox, all kinds of measures to figure out these sales lifts. When we look across all of our digital advertising, this should say somewhere how many studies. It doesn't, sorry. This is, I think this is also like 1,200 or 1,400 digital studies. You can see it matters what category you're talking about. Actually, we've recently discovered what really drives these numbers is the spend. So if you think Tabasco, you can spend a fortune driving Tabasco sales, and you might get $3 more per household, in a year. They only buy twice a year. Now you've bought 3 times. But if you're talking about something like soda, where it's every day, it's much faster. You can drive a lot more dollars. If you're so these are averages across all of our categories, include thousands of studies. This next one is radio. Radio, each one of these is a brand. So this is not an average. So you're going to see wider variation. But what's interesting is you see retailers on the right from $11 to $23. Those are because instead of just buying one Tabasco, you're talking about a bag of groceries. And in the case of the larger retailer, there's some electronics and other things in that bag as too. So they tend to have a larger spend. So it really matters how much money is spent per week to drive these kind of incremental sales. So, in conclusion, we can help drive better advertising effectiveness and marketing through actual retail sales, which turn out to be a pretty good predictor of what happens in the future. Linking purchase in media versus single source is extremely powerful. It creates the ability to look for your ideal customer. You can reach your consumer through any media, and you can make your media dollars work harder and drive measurable incremental retail sales. And we call it return on ad spend, commonly called ROI, but we don't have margins. So we say for every dollar spent in advertising, what did you get back in sales? So it's return on ad spend. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Claudia and Bob.
Okay, I'll kick it off here, and
Oh, no.
so we're a relatively newcomer compared to Nielsen and Catalina. We were driven to do more research as a way to validate the effectiveness of some of the technology we developed. Visible World. So Visible World is an ad tech company, a television ad technology company. We develop targeted TV advertising technology that's fairly broadly deployed to target TV ads down to cable head-end level. That's roughly a neighborhood level, and that's very widely deployed. And then also down to individual set-top, as Leslie also pointed out a bit ago. And our focus on research comes about primarily driven from trying to help some of our larger clients understand the effectiveness of TV advertising. So we work with hundreds of clients, execute thousands of campaigns, but I wanted to point out that our largest groups of clients are cable operators and the TV networks themselves. So that's for them, and they have something in common. They both keep a portion of their ad inventory to promote their own products and services, and that's really the work that we're focused on, is on helping them better understand the impact of their marketing efforts. So one of the important pieces, just as Leslie pointed out, that the fundamental base for understanding the impact of behavior, of buying behavior, is how often you may buy or how much you buy. Same is true for television. So one of the fundamental aspects of anything that has to do with ad effectiveness is how much time people spend watching TV. And as you can see, TV is still very strong in terms of how much time people devote. The average is around 5 hours per household. per week. And I'm sorry, per day. No, per day. And that's far more than any other medium. But what I wanted to point out here is that a large portion of that's still linear TV. So I like to say that the we in this room are not the we in this country. That for every one of us that time shifts and watches relatively little TV, there's a counterpart that's watching 9 hours and doing very little time shifting. So, okay. Sorry. All right. So we were driven into research primarily to support our efforts on the technology side. And we started initially with set-top box data, and Leslie already said sort of some of the challenges of working with set-top box data, ditto here, and Bob has suffered through most of that, so we could talk about it. But we've also more recently started working with smart TV data, and that's a fairly new effort for us, but I wanted to touch on both of them. So starting with, for cable operators, I'm going to highlight one example just to give you a flavor for the type of research we've been doing. Here's a mid-sized cable operator where we matched up all of their subscriber records. So this is essentially the subscriber portfolio, all the different products and services they consume, and for 18 months worth of that. And then we matched it against all of the campaigns, all of their marketing campaigns, which are done in their cross-channel inventory, their own TV ad inventory. And we took out the brand-oriented campaigns and focused exclusively on campaigns that had a specific product and offer. And there were 144 such campaigns over a period of 18 months. And then we examined those at the individual insertion level. So all the way down to each individual ad insertion on each individual cable head end for this cable operator. And we also combine that with all of the viewing for 18 months for all of the subscribers for this particular operator. So altogether over 10 billion viewing records. So essentially we were matching stimuli, campaign stimuli to purchase behavior via the viewing behavior, okay? And again, one of the underlying drivers of the performance of campaigns is heavily reliant on how much time people spend viewing. And as this shows, TV viewing is largely skewed. So you have the top quintile accounting for 45% of all viewing, and if you add the top two quintiles, it's almost 70% of all the viewing. And that, of course, has a huge impact on the performance on your ability to actually reach and build frequency with your, in this case, your subscribers. Going into this research, the CMO of this particular cable operator felt that their biggest challenge was that they were overexposing their subscribers with their campaigns, right? In fact, they have so much inventory allocated to their own marketing efforts that they felt that their biggest challenge was actually what he called feed the beast, which was mean just keeping up with the pace of campaigns to keep on changing the creative so that it wouldn't wear out with their subscribers. One of the more interesting findings was that because TV viewing is so skewed, what ends up happening is that you are overexposing a relatively small percentage of all your subscribers, and in a fairly significant percentage of them are underexposed. In fact, quite a bit underexposed. And so what you see here is that this was again across 144 campaigns. So what this says is that 50% of the subscribers only saw on average one exposure per campaign, right? Whereas you have about 4% of the subscribers seeing 10 or more exposures. So a huge amount of your inventory is actually going into just a relatively small percentage of subscribers. So that the answer to his question is no, you're only overexposing a very small percentage, you're underexposing most of your subscribers. And so then we looked at the impact that this had on the effectiveness of their campaigns. So we essentially looked at for which households were best suited for which products and services being offered. So we considered an ad to be on target if you did not have that product, and we considered it to be off target if you already had that product. Very simple. But here you see a scatter plot of all the campaigns, and you see that the overall campaign conversion is all over the lot, but when you look at just on target prospects, the conversion significantly higher. It's of course, it's fundamental, it's very basic and logical why that would happen, but we wanted to, again, illustrate that a large portion of the investment is actually going against subscribers who already had the product, so that's a relative large amount of waste of exposures, and that if you did reach the right subscribers with the right message, you increase your conversion rate substantially. And here we map out by the viewing quintiles the response curve, the conversion rate. So you can see that conversions increase up to a point, and then they are relatively flat. We've since implemented, as a result of this, we've since implemented with a different cable operator the ability to do frequency capping on TV ads. And that obviously, you saw how much extra inventory is wasted on overexposure, so the ability to frequency cap frees up inventory and makes the campaigns more effective. And Bob will talk a little bit more about other things that we're doing in terms of implementing and making this information actionable. Before Bob comes on board, I want to just touch on probably the most exciting area of data for us today, and that's smart TV data. So what's interesting about smart TV data, as Leslie pointed out, set-top box data is rather challenging to work with. Not only do you have the edit rules, but you'll have to decide, in most households, people turn on and off their TV. They leave their set-top box on. So you have a lot of false positives. You have to figure out how you're going to edit out those false positives. There's a lot of different data sets across the different operators, so bringing them together is no easy task. As a result, this data is not it has a significant amount of latency, because by the time you clean it up and get it together, it's been weeks from when it's actually happened. Smart TV, on the other hand, looks a lot more like internet data. It's very clean. It's very fresh. We are typically getting them either in real time or overnight, right? And the other interesting thing about smart TV data is that it's fairly agnostic. It's agnostic to the type of operator. It's agnostic to the type of viewing. It's agnostic to the type of ad inventory. It does have one major bias, and Leslie pointed out that this is data coming from connected smart TVs, right? So it is biased by definition. It's not necessarily a representative sample of the U.S. On the other hand, it is such a large amount of data that you can drill down to very specific variables and understand what your response rates are with that specific criteria, right? So that's how we've been using the data. We started with one network. So we've been focused primarily on program promotion, because there you have the stimuli. You were exposed to the promotion for the program, and then we can see whether there was actual program viewing for the promoted program. So the ability to close the loop is the main reason why we started with program promotion. We started with one network back in April of last year. We formally launched in September of last year, and now we have over 14 networks using it. And I'm going to turn it over to Bob, who's going to go into how we're applying this data.
So the smart TV data is giving us insight, and the network's insight that they've never had before, because for the first time they know who exactly has viewed the promotional ad, how many times they've seen it, on what network and time they were exposed to it, and then whether they eventually then tune into the show that's being promoted. So historically, they would target their promotional ads based on the content. So this content is fairly similar to the show I'm promoting, so I'm going to put that ad in, without any real insight into whether that converted somebody to then view the show. So for the first time, we now have data that gives us information on who's seeing those promotional ads, and then who eventually is tuning into that show. And I'm just going to go to the next one here. So that information is interesting, but for that to be really useful, we want to make it actionable. We want to give the networks something that will help them execute smarter advertising schedules. And so what we do is we take that information, we take that conversion-based information, we use knowledge of what inventory they have available to play these ads, and we find out how we can place those ads to maximize the conversion to their show. And we automate this process with our technology stack, which allows us to automate on a daily basis. Claudio said this data can come in overnight. So for the next day, we can have information that may suggest how we might best place these ads. So before, it was kind of a spray and pray. So we have all this inventory, and we're going to place these ads across that inventory. And hopefully we get enough viewers to the show because we've placed this well enough. What this is a much more targeted scheduling based on that conversion information. And so before, where it's sort of all over the map as far as the network and day part goes, which is what these heat maps show, here it's a very focused allocation of ads. So traditionally, again, they'll use things like Nielsen data to target their target demographic. They'll find out where they tend to view, and they'll place their ads accordingly. They'll find out where they index highly across networks and times or programs, and then they'll place those ads. The change here is now we're placing it based on the actual conversion. So it's closing the loop of what we want to get to, which is viewers of the show. So Leslie mentioned before, it's sort of like the buyer graphic rather than the demographic. Here the buyer graphic is somebody who converts to a view. And what we've done is we've implemented the ability to dynamically create these schedules based on the latest data that's coming in from here. And what we found is when we're planning media campaigns, one of the biggest challenges is can we predict where our viewers are going to be in the future? And that can be a challenge going weeks or months into the future to plan media campaigns. But what this has done is take some of that challenge away, because now if we have some advertising inventory available on a daily basis, we can use the latest data, day to day, to adjust our campaigns. And so if our guest was off for the next day, a program was rated higher than we expected, or lower, we can adjust how we allocate our media the very next day to make up for that, or maybe attribute it to other ads where we need the media weight. Okay.
That's it.
And one of the other areas where we're using this type of technology is Visible World now has a subsidiary called Audience Express, which is programmatic TV buying. We leverage a lot of Nielsen's data, actually. And we use that to optimize media campaigns, leverage very detailed data like the buyer graphics data, and have deployed it pretty widely.
Thank you.
I must compliment the four speakers. They are on time. An unusual phenomena, but they were terrific. And Pete, you really started the example.
There you go.
Let's open it for some audience questions, comments, and then would like to take the last half of our kind of allotted time here for some interaction among the panelists. So any questions? Yeah, please.
So I've got two questions. The first one's for Pete. You'd mentioned that the usage of credit card data was able to increase our performance by 25%. But does that 25% outweigh the cost that will go towards the advertiser for using that third-party data?
No. It's a really simple answer. No, it's a good point, though. But clearly, you have to think about the cost of everything. But
Please use the mic, please.
is this mic on? Can people hear me okay now? Yeah. Okay. Right. It's a good point. Of course, you have to think about the costs of the whole transaction. No, there is value in spending the extra money. And as I pointed out, it's doing better than 25%. And it's up to you to really decide if you're advertising what you want to bid as well. You may choose you want to bid, say, 20% more, even though you know you've got, say, a 40% improvement. So it's up to you to decide, what your arbitrage is going to be.
My next question is for Claudio and Bob. So when measuring ad exposure for television, do you guys get to account for the increased use of, platforms like TiVo or DVR where consumers can kind of fast forward through the commercials?
So at present, we're focusing on live same day, actually. But again, as I mentioned, the smart TV data is agnostic to the type of viewing because it's basically based on automated content recognition of the content itself. and we can apply some fairly simple analytics to distinguish between live. Essentially, when it's live, we get detections all over the place. When it's time shifted, we get them as one-offs. And so one of our, on our long list of things to do is drill down on the impact of time shifted.
Any other questions, comments? Yes, please. Can you wait, please? Here's Mike.
Could you distinguish between the people meter and then what you called set box data, how you collect it?
Sure. So actually, Nielsen has now two different kinds of meters, but the meter that is generally used to collect all of our Nielsen ratings is a people meter. It's a meter that sits on the box. People check in that they're in. The key there is that not only do we know exactly what was on the TV, but every TV has a meter on it in the household, and that sample is selected to be extremely well collected and balanced to the country. Otherwise, you wouldn't imagine that you could have such a huge. Those ratings are the currency that buying and trading of ratings happens for. $1 billion. What? People meter is 25,000 households. The set-top box data is just a collection of we actually have two providers. One is more bi-coastal, the other is, not even, one is big cities and the other small, so that we have a bit of a mix. Every set-top box provider has different kinds of boxes, and each box is edited differently and produces different kinds of data, so we have to have different edit rules, and we're constantly monitoring. Recently, now a year ago, there was a new set of edit rules, and we discovered there something we call machine-initiated channel changing, where the machine itself was changing the channel, and so that changed all our rules, and it turned out that actually we could not edit that data to be usable, so we don't use it. I don't know how anybody that doesn't have both good actual real viewing data that they know is real, it's hard to imagine how you clean up the data at the household level. You can get it right at the average rating level, but I'm not sure you can get it right at the household level.
An important kind of comment to everyone in terms of the importance of cleaning the data and make sure they validate, use multiple data sources.
Just if I could just add one point as well about the National People Meter measurement. It includes the measurement of individuals via a handset registration that our recruited panel members do. And that's different from set-top box data, which is essentially a sort of measurement of what a box was tuned to. So you don't get individual level data with set-top box data, at least not without doing some sort of imputation or modeling onto that tuning. Correct. Yeah.
Let me ask a question of the audience. How many of you are using?
Not for the people meter.
No,
for set-top boxes, third party,
separate.
yes.
Yeah.
How many of you are using single source data in your research or in your operations? Can we see a show of hands? Actually, very few. Those of you, any of those who did not raise your hand, have you tried and were not able to do it? And if yes, would you like to share with us the experience of what have you learned from trying and not being able to do it? No volunteers for this. Okay. Let me turn then a question to the panel here. So we heard about kind of fascinating examples of single source data here. And we start hearing a little bit about some new areas like the smart TV. What else is on the horizon? If you look forward, and as we see the changes that's happening around, and especially the changes with the beginning of wearable TV, with wearable computing, with Google Glasses, with the watches and others, when you deal with the Internet of Things, what do you see in terms of the next step? Don't describe to us the path, but the next step in the development of moving towards single source data.
Sure, and I think you touched on it. It's the multimedia advertising, being able to connect exposures on the TV to exposures on the tablet to mobile, and having all that information in one place for advertisers. So I think that's really the direction things.
So
like
are
that.
you doing work in this? I'm really interested in terms of, so where do we see the development? Where is the next step, the next big step in the data we're moving toward? Because we've been talking about single source data forever.
Yeah, I think we've started looking into ways to connect online behavior to TV viewership, to smart TV data. I think some of these things are early on, but I think over the next few years you're going to see a lot of progress there, and it's going to make it pretty valuable for advertisers.
Right. Well, one of the things that a connected TV has is an IP address. So we're doing some third-party blind matching on IP address to the point of trying to get closer to understanding the individual or the household behavior as opposed to the device. And for some households, it's fairly easy. So single-person households, okay, if they're watching that device, it's probably that person, right? For others, it's more difficult, and you have to start using some analytics that align the type of programming to the device data and to other third-party data that you've obtained via third-party IP matching. So, but I think there's progress going to be made, and I do think the next 5 years is going to be a fairly radical change in terms of incorporating more information and models about the impact of TV viewing on marketing at large.
Leslie and Pete, what
Well,
can we
I'd
expect
say-
from Nielsen?
I would say cross-media isn't just TV screens. I have a real problem with TV being the definition of media.
Amen.
So, yes, we're all trying to connect all the parts. We do have bits and pieces of many parts. In terms of the media side of what we do, we've recently connected radio, and as you saw, we've done 10 studies with radio. That's only currency quality. We don't have big, but I don't know where there is big data for radio yet. We haven't found that source. Outdoor, love to have outdoor. I think that's going to end up with a mobile device being able to recognize locations. We're hoping that happens. Radio, newspapers, we're just bringing in for the currency side. We don't have big data for newspapers. Magazines, we're about ready to get. We're just working with MRI to have currency, and so we're working to have all the pieces be paired. But we're also, on the other side, have the buy data. So we're primarily supermarkets. We've recently added a drugstore chain. There's a whole series of drugstores where chains, so we have Rite Aid, and the next one line can only really add one at a time. The next one's in line to be added. We're looking to add C-stores. We definitely want mass. So we need more. We are confined to consumer packaged goods, but we want to have all the ways that consumer packaged goods are bought. So it's buy and watch.
And keep in mind, we're really talking not only consumer packaged good industry.
No,
There are
that's
many-
just me.
That's you, but
right.
I'm saying for the audience in general, talk about single source data. Don't limit yourself to what we hear here in the typically consumer packaged goods. Look at the example of the kind of what we heard about the baseball before,
Yep.
and many, many other areas. So when we talk about single source data, it applies to everything. Ali, can we have a mic here?
I
Yeah,
just
please repeat while we're waiting
I
for
just
the
wanted
mic.
to make a point, and it may be considered pedantic, but I actually worry when we talk about single source data, and there's two reasons I worry about it. One is mostly we're not creating single source data. What we're doing is we're taking disparate data sources and matching them as best we can, and that's absolutely fine, but it isn't single source. That to me means something else. And the other reason I think that's an important consideration is around the area of privacy. And this idea that we have a single source piece of information, somehow there's this sort of NSA Big Brother sort of entity that says we know everything about you. That to me is a very worrying thing. So that's why I'm cautious about the use of single sources
Great
as well.
comment. Ali?
So I have more of a cultural question, I guess. For all of you that are at the cutting edge of this, how many years are we away from a world where advertisers simply refuse to buy advertising that they don't have response measurement for? If you go to San Francisco, they're there. The people who live in digital won't buy advertising without response measurement. When is the rest of media going to catch up?
I think it really, there's sort of two trends, right? On the one hand, everything wants to be measured. But on the other hand, you have even online advertising that's looking to be monetized for branding, right? So those are sort of two counter trends that are prevailing. And so I think it depends on the intent, and I think it's really different types of measurements. So in one case, you're really trying to measure broader brand impact, brand choice, brand preference, and for certain categories, that's extremely important. For other categories that are much more driven by direct response, then obviously it makes perfect sense to be very granular.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's just a big continuum, and you don't expect to have an immediate effect of you advertise a Lexus and then somebody rushes out of their house and buys a Lexus. That's clearly a very different proposition. Oh, that's right. They wouldn't rush out anymore, would they? They'd just do it online.
I would like to add a piece here, though. So when I started in media research a long time ago, I was given this rule: you're only going to spend so much to measure something in relationship to what it already costs. Sure. So if it costs $1 to buy a spot, you're not going to spend more 5 cents, 10 cents to measure it. So I think that there's the threshold, is how expensive does it actually, what does it actually cost to measure some things? And some of these things are, the reason they're not expensive is because they can't be measured well. But on the other hand, some of it's just sheer volume and the impact that advertising could possibly make. It's not worth going through the exercise to measure.
Let me try to take a different perspective on Ellie's question, which is not along the line of the three presentations we heard, but along the line of experimentation. And I think the solution to this will be, hopefully, increasing number of advertisers will realize that they need to know the results, and the results is not only in the measurement of these guys, but really by taking on an ongoing basis adaptive experimentation. And I think we'll do it. I think everyone will be better off in terms of the results. I would like to continue one more point on what we talked about the future. And we run a program here on the future of advertising, and one of the key findings we had a project on AdWords 2020. One of the key messages that came from over 200 thought leaders from all over the world is that we have to start focusing not on the traditional media, but on all touch points. That the essence of effective advertising and any messaging is really reaching the consumer in all touch points. Touch points, product design, package design, store design, call center, sales force, any interaction with employees. We're talking about a very small slice of the world, of the touch points here. So the question is, and any effort among the kind of the big players in this industry to start measuring other touch points other than the traditional type of media?
We have begun several. So I'm Chief Research Officer, so I do R&D, and I do it with clients. So I have 2 existing projects with clients. One is in the area of coupons and understanding coupons. And the other is on another form of that, in what happens in a store. So we're looking at these things, and
we definitely agree with that perspective. But the primary clients we're focused on have a large amount of TV inventory that they use for their own marketing purposes, and so the value of actually optimizing the use of that inventory to them is far greater than a lot of these other channels. So, for example, we did some analysis for one of our cable operators, and for every non-TV touch point they reach a customer with, they expose them 43 times through their TV channel, through their cross-channel media, right? So how much influence is that one touch point relative to the 43? It may be very much, but optimizing the 43 is where the big opportunity is.
Yeah, but that's not to say that if they had more impressions on the other, because I actually believe that some of us do best with sight, some of us do best with hearing, others are smell. Like, we all learn different ways, and so if we only use television, you're only going to get people who are visual.
I completely agree, but
one way.
But the product that our clients
promote is TV. So
Claudio,
for
from
those
your point of
folks,
view, it's
you know,
absolutely right.
You
You have a unique, you have a
Yeah, but
unique
I'm not
product.
sure that that's the best advice to them, is to
Right.
never
no,
do
I
anything
said
but
that.
TV.
That's why I said I agree.
But keep this in mind, because we're talking about advertising in general, not necessarily the
yeah.
cable or the TV operator.
Of course.
And for them, the touch points are becoming critical.
Well, and I think, Jerry, you were going beyond just advertising. You were talking about
Correct. Of
course.
the
All-
whole nature of what you do to promote a brand.
Correct.
And that goes way beyond just advertising. And we are working, and I guess market mix models have tried to do that for 20 years or more. And we are working on what you might consider to be the next generation of market mix models that takes much larger data sources and tries to understand in a more micro level detail how these different influences are affecting consumer response. So I think that probably answers your question reasonably well. That is, I think, in a lot of people's minds, where the next wave of this sort of effectiveness measurement is coming from.
So we should have another session basically on marketing mix modeling in the new era, where we really
Yeah.
start dealing
Yeah.
with truly
It's true.
all touch points, and ideally moving at a point that was mentioned before in Claudia and Bob's presentation, real time. How do we move to real-time data in dealing with this? So it was a fascinating session. Thank you, panelists, for enlightening us on at least the data side. We didn't have time to talk any about that analytics of what do you do with the data, but at least on the data side, and a real side benefit for everyone here in terms of some of the findings. And one thing to think about, we as a field are really poor in findings, in knowing what actually happened, substantive knowledge. And especially Leslie would talk about thousands of studies, and each one of you in thousands of studies, it's asking for meta-analysis and for start showing more, what do we really know about what advertising works? So thanks for enriching us all in the discussion, and please join me in thanking the panel.